Hey guys, so in my last video I was going to talk about Matt, my fiance, because it is the 2-year anniversary of the first conversation that we ever had where he expressed any kind of interest. I don't think I mentioned this before anywhere on here, but so I at some point envisioned, I felt strongly, what would my husband feel like? And I had this image in my mind of a man with a shaved head, wearing a plaid shirt, sort of watching over me at some sort of social gathering. This is just what popped into my head. It's like I was in a social group. I looked across the room. There's my husband. Here's what he looks like, and there's this vibe. I'm feeling like protected. I have this. I feel like he's keeping an eye on me. And why that popped into my head, I don't know. It just did. And that was a brief thought, and it happened while I was still like manifesting a specific person and had another person in my actual 3D immediate reality sort of coming on to me romantically. It was a very confusing time, and I'm like, I really don't need to be thinking about what my husband feels like right now. Like, just don't do it. Just don't go there. So I stopped myself almost immediately in this scene and exited. Said, this is not the time to be doing this. However, whatever the mechanism is that creates that, didn't give a shit about the fact that I stopped, because almost immediately Matt, who has a shaved head and wears plaid shirts, showed up in my reality. I had no idea who he was. He was commenting on something, on a post I made on Reddit. And pretty quickly he mentioned having an adult son. And so because I am so unaware of the fact that I am in my 40s, well, I was 40 at the time, when he said that, I immediately thought, oh, this is somebody in their 60s. Forgetting that I, in fact, am old enough to have an adult child if I had started young. Matt had a son when he was 20. So I didn't figure out that Matt and I were the same age, even though we were talking back and forth for months. We were talking back and forth, and I was like, oh, this is this older guy who's just like interested in this topic. No like romantic inkling at all, even though I had said to him several times, oh, you really remind me of all the men in my life, that, like, you know, you remind me of my dad, you remind me of my ex, you remind me, but whatever, like, you know, it's funny when I look back on the stuff that I said to him, it makes perfect sense that we ended up together. But it took a long time to get to the point where I was ready to actually see what was happening, you know, see this person in front of me. It wasn't until the day after I realized that I still believed that there was nobody good out there, the day after I had that sort of conscious realization, I'm still thinking that, yes, my romantic fulfillment's a done deal, but I have no idea how that's going to happen, because there's like nobody left out there. Like that was like the thing that would happen every time I said my romantic fulfillment's a done deal. I finally just figured out that I was thinking that and said, wow, you got to stop that. This is dumb. There are lots of good people out there. This doesn't even make sense. Like, it's not like I'm in Siberia and there's nobody around, you know. The next day I had a conversation with Matt, and I don't know if it was like a personal conversation where we actually got personal with each other, not just like a surface commentary on something we had read, or, you know, which he'd been trying to do for a long time. He'd been trying to talk to me for a long time. And he says that the day before I reached out and we had this conversation, that he had decided not to contact me again, because he'd kept trying to talk to me and it just was going nowhere. So so we had that conversation, and a few things happened during it that made me think, okay, this is definitely the right person. The first thing was, since I was 13 years old, I've been hearing my stepfather tell the story over and over and over again, at least yearly, probably monthly, about how when he first saw my mom, I mean, they've been married for 30 years. When he first saw my mom, he lost his mind. He knew that she was the woman for him. They were both entangled with divorce, sort of like they were both in relationships that were ending at the time. My dad was already he had already left. My parents were separated, and my stepfather was like, you know, at the end of his rope in his marriage. And he said when he saw her, he knew that she was the person he was supposed to be with, and he just lost his mind. He just knew. And so that all played out non-scandalously for the most part. But so for me, my whole life I've been hearing this story and thinking, nobody's ever said that about me. What's wrong with me? You know, do I really have to like end up with somebody who doesn't feel this way about me? That fucking sucks. Like, you know, this was on my mind. This was not like a back thought. I'm just like, man, you know, I've never had a guy show up in that way, like in that romantic type of way. My long-term ex, who is still in the picture now, we're financial partners, we own a business together. It was similar, he had a similar level of like instant devotion to our relationship. So I feel the need to say that because I feel a little bad when I'm like, no guy ever showed up. My ex showed up for me in a huge way, but not in the romantic way that I wanted. And so in this conversation I'm having with Matt, this first day, which was 2 years ago, somehow the conversation came around to the point, and he said, I really shouldn't tell you this, but the first time I ever saw your face, like on this channel, the first time I saw you on a video, I just knew that if we ever met, we would be together. And I have to tell you, that type of comment would absolutely have freaked me out if it came from any other person. That's not the kind of thing that I think most people want to hear from some random person that they don't really know that well. It comes off as kind of stalkery and creepy, and Matt was like, I really hope that that's not how this is coming off, but it's the truth. And something about it to me, I was just like, there it is. There it is. This is coming from a sane individual, and he's been keeping this under wraps for 6 months. So then I was like, of course, this went off in my mind. I didn't say that. I didn't say, oh, I've been, somebody was going to say this to me. I knew it. And then, so that kind of turned things more romantic. And then later on in that conversation, I said, hey, you don't have this particular last name, do you? In my 20s, I dated this guy who had like the perfect last name for my first and middle name. It's like this name that rolls off the tongue. I was like, I'm gonna marry a guy whose name starts with that letter that is of this particular ethnicity, because that will complete my perfect name. I know this is all really cheesy, but it's just like, I obviously had totally abandoned that and wasn't holding out for that or anything like that. But this is one of those things from 20 years ago that, I remember like telling people that in my 20s. I'm gonna marry a guy with this, what a last name. I'm like, you don't happen to have this ethnicity last name that starts with this letter, do you? He does. So that was another little Easter egg. These are all meaningless things, but just things that were part of my ultimate romantic fulfillment being done. So, we're sitting there, both of us getting more and more convinced. We're just like, what the hell's happening there? So more and more, it just became, it just turned into this really great thing that didn't have any aspects to it that were like horrible or soul crushing or like, oh my God, this guy just showed up and he's, he said that I'm the one and he's got the right name and all these little clues, but oh man, he's like a meth head, there was nothing crazy like that. He just was a normal, decent person, without any major drama or baggage, somebody whose life path has taken one that's similar to mine in a lot of ways. A lot of our sort of milestones with where we were mentally happened around the same time, even over the last couple of years before we met. And so still, I was like really not, I was really not convinced about anything, and I kept saying, we have to meet in person. He lived a couple states away, and when we met in person, I just knew when I saw him. When I saw him walking up, I don't know how I knew. I just knew. I was just like, I just felt this wave wash over me of total peace about the situation. That's the only thing I can think of, the only way I can think of to describe it. We met at a bar halfway between where we lived at the time. And so we spent time in this bar together, just kind of like, it was kind of awkward in a way. Because I think we both like knew it was just weird. I mean, it's weird when you meet somebody that you kind of think is the person you're going to end up with for the first time. It was really bizarre, especially for me, because prior to actually seeing him in person, I didn't know for sure. I didn't have that feeling. And it wasn't about how he looked. It was just something about his presence that made me feel like he was, I don't know if there's a soulmate. I don't know if it's the right one. This might just be a way that I experienced a relationship for the first time ever. This was the first new person that I had ever in my life, from the standpoint of not feeling like there was something gravely wrong with me deep down. So, that's the thing. I'm just interpreting these feelings through, the Hollywood romance, U.S. culture. I don't know what any of this really meant, these feelings, but it was a completely different experience from anyone I've ever had before. And so we spent like 4 hours in this bar talking. And when we got ready to leave, we went up and sat at the bar to drink some water. And there was this dude sitting there. This guy. He was just some random guy. This was like in the middle of cornfields. I don't know who this guy was or why he lived there, what he was doing. He's sitting there and he looked over at us and he said, you know, with the way that you're looking at her and the way she's looking at you, you can just tell you guys are gonna last. Like, what? Who even says something like that to somebody? Just some random dude in a bar just said that to us. And we just looked at each other like, holy shit. And then we went to go home. We went in the parking lot. We made out in the parking lot for a half hour. And then that was where it all began. So since then, he has just been completely reliable. No bullshit. There's never been a moment of the typical relationship garbage that so many people in the SP area are dealing with. I mean, you know, a lot of this has to do with you. If you respect yourself enough to not tolerate any kind of, you know, abuse or neglect or cheating or any kind of like really big integrity flaws on the part of your partner, you're going to find, I think, that you have a much better time in relationships anyway. My relationships have been with pretty decent people for 15 years. I had an abusive relationship that changed everything for me. I just realized that, I still at the time had that deep down flawed feeling, but I was like, man, nobody's fucking flawed enough to have to deal with that. And I respect and care about myself enough to not deal with abuse or any of that shit. So this isn't some miracle that my fiance is a decent guy. But the whole relationship has been pretty healthy. And he's really proven himself to me. Right out the gate, he was there for me during my dad being sick and dying in a real way, doing real things that I don't think anybody would really want to be doing, watching things I don't think anybody would want to be watching, dealing with me being in a state of extreme stress, which I never took out on him at all, but he had to deal with me yelling in my car and for months afterwards getting just irate at people like at drive-thrus who would fuck my order up. I was having like total, that was kind of how stuff came out for me for months after my dad died. The grief, whatever it was, the stress, I don't really know what it was. It came out in this just inability to tolerate the outside world. I basically just had to kind of sit in after a couple weeks, Matt was like, listen, I'm just gonna go. I wasn't like raging out at the people. I want to be clear about that. I was just getting super fucking pissed internally about other people, like being inconsiderate on the road, not being careful about things that I was buying, giving me the wrong things. Like I would just leave and then just stew and just be super pissed. That was kind of one of the ways it came out. And Matt was like, listen, I think it would be better like if you just don't experience this. So I'll go get everything for a while. Like I'll take care of everything in the outer world for a while, which was so fucking amazing. I mean, just stuff like that. He was just so great about everything. I had a weird episode last summer where I think I got dehydrated and I woke up in the middle of the night with the room like spinning wildly. And, he was so great. He took, he got up and he's like, you need to stay in bed. I'm going to go get you Pedialyte. This is what this guy's like. He's awesome. He's a human being. He's got his flaws. I'm a human being. I have my flaws. This is still working in accordance with the law. I have people that comment on here that are like, oh, you found the perfect thing. It's not. It's a relationship. It's just a good relationship. It's a relationship that's healthy enough to continue. And it had those little romantic Easter eggs in the beginning. It's not a perfect relationship. And, especially over the last, basically since we met, shit has just been going down in both of our lives. First it was me, with my dad, and then other things. And then in our environment, our neighbors were crazy and it made our lives hell, while getting arrested and doing illegal things. And it was just insane. And then, other things happened. We bought a house. I had to plan a funeral for my dad, a destination funeral, essentially, because he couldn't have a funeral during COVID. It was just a very stressful time since then. And you know, we're not immune to that. The relationship has not magically risen above that stuff. That's the thing. I don't think there's a magic relationship out there. It's just that when you get to a good place, then you can have a healthy relationship, and it probably will feel a lot better to you than all the other ones. But like, people that are under the impression that like I manifested up some magic relationship and I didn't have to do anything internally for that. No, I didn't have to do anything externally except recognize that he was there. But internally, there was a ton of changing that happened for years and years leading up to that point. There was a ton of changing that I had to do about myself. I had to get to the point where I fully got it that I wasn't I had all these, I had to change all my beliefs. I had to do all this stuff to get this relationship. And it's still just a normal human relationship. It's just one that isn't toxic and abusive and, nobody loves each other and all that's, it's just a good relationship. It's not some perfect magical thing. Please don't ever think I'm saying that. I'm sure as Matt and I both continue to improve over time, the relationship will get even better. But all I can do is improve myself and, enjoy the benefits of my improved self on my relationship. That's it. So I wanted to make that and just talk about Matt, and I love Matt, and we're engaged, and we don't have wedding plans yet. There's been COVID concerns. I have elderly relatives, and I still didn't want to try to plan something where there could be another big COVID wave where then they would either not be able to attend or have to risk getting COVID. I'm so tired of this COVID shit. But then also the worker shortage stuff started happening right around the time that I would have wanted to start planning stuff. And I just started thinking, I really don't want to risk getting a wedding venue and then having issues with staffing, especially since that could happen like on the day of, I don't want to deal with any of that. And I'm just not willing to this isn't something I want to put my energy on to try to manifest, because specifically because I feel confident that the exact perfect thing will present itself and happen without any effort at all, without me even trying to inject myself into it at all. So I'm feeling more and more like it's getting to be closer and closer to the time that whatever that thing is going to show up. So you'll see it unfold here. I will let you know when I am married or when there is some sort of plan to do that in a concrete way. So anyway, I hope that you found that interesting, Matt. If you ever watch this, I love you. And I hope everybody has a great day. Bye.